You ever notice how some moments, small as they seem, can crack your whole world open? I'm talking about a rainy morning in downtown Asheville, where Eddie Thompson, a 68-year-old street sweeper, got drenched by a fancy Range Rover speeding through a puddle on purpose. The guy behind the wheel, Victor Grayson, tech tycoon with a smirk as sharp as his suit, laughed like it was a game, like Eddie was just some nobody to mess with. But Eddie? He wasn't just a guy with a broom, was a war hero, a man who'd carried secrets heavier than that mud, and that splash was about to unravel a story nobody saw coming. It was a typical Monday in Asheville, rain turning the streets slick, folks rushing past with their umbrellas, barely noticing Eddie as he swept the curbs. He'd nod to the barista, Clara, who'd call out, "Stay dry, Mr. Thompson," and he'd chuckle, "Dry enough, darlin'," his voice warm, weathered, like he'd seen worse than a drizzle. Eddie moved with a kind of precision, decades of discipline in every sweep, a holdover from his days as Captain Eddie Thompson, who dragged a cocky young Lieutenant Grayson out of a firefight in some godforsaken jungle. But that was 20 years ago, buried under a fake name, a fake death, all to keep him safe after he blew the whistle on a dirty military program called Project Vanguard. Drugs tested on soldiers like lab rats, mostly black and Latino guys like Eddie's platoon. 17 of his men didn't make it home, not because of bullets, but because of heart attacks, breakdowns, suicides, all from those damn drugs. Eddie testified, risked everything, only to have the system slap him down, fake his death, and leave him sweeping streets to stay invisible. That splash, though? It wasn't just mud, it was a spark. A kid at the bus stop, Mia, caught it all on her phone. Victor's laugh, the water hitting Eddie, and Eddie just standing there, wiping his face with this quiet dignity that screamed louder than any curse. By noon, that 10-second clip was everywhere, captioned, "You picked the wrong guy to mess with." The internet went wild, people calling Victor out, digging into Eddie's face, sensing there was more to this old man than a city uniform. And there was. Across town, Victor's daughter, Lena Grayson, saw the video and froze. She knew Eddie not as a soldier, but as the quiet guy who dropped off art supplies at her community center, never asking for a thank you. Lena, 26, had spent years pulling away from her dad's world of money and ego, pouring her heart into kids' art classes instead. Now, seeing her father's cruelty, she felt a pit in her stomach. She had to know who Eddie really was. Meanwhile, Detective Sarah Coleman, working a desk piled with case files, got a nudge from a colleague to watch the clip. She rolled her eyes, another viral stunt, but when she saw Eddie's face, her heart stopped. She knew that face from an old photo in her dad's files, a soldier standing next to Colonel Tom Coleman, her father, who'd killed himself 15 years ago after chasing a case that sounded a lot like Eddie's story. Sarah dug out that dusty folder labeled Operation Nightfall, her dad's last obsession, and there it was, Eddie Thompson, listed as dead, but clearly alive, sweeping Asheville's streets. Her dad had written one note in the margin, "Find Thompson." She was on the hunt now, her gut telling her this wasn't just about a splash. The story started spiraling. Lena hit the library, pulling old news clippings, finding a photo of Eddie in a crisp uniform, shaking hands with a senator for valor. She pieced together his past, Captain Thompson, whistleblower, erased by a system protecting guys like her grandfather, Roland Grayson, who'd made millions supplying those Vanguard drugs. At the same time, Sarah tracked down leads tying her dad's death to a cover-up, her hands shaking as she read about soldiers used as guinea pigs. And Victor? He was sweating. His boardroom was a war zone, investors bailing, reporters sniffing around old military contracts. He tried to shrug it off, telling Lena over a tense dinner, "He's just some old guy, Lena, a nobody, why do you care?" She shot back, "He's somebody, Dad, and you're gonna hate finding out who." Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with betrayal. Then the ghosts came back. Tyrone Shade Carter, Eddie's old comrade, presumed dead, showed up at Eddie's apartment one night, moving like a shadow, his voice low. "They know you're alive, Eddie. This ain't random." Shade had survived the same ambush, the same cover-up, and now the world was catching up. The two old soldiers sat over coffee, piecing together what was happening. Victor's family, the military brass, someone was cleaning house. Across town, Sarah found a clue in her dad's files, a storage unit with a hard drive, Recordings of Roland Grayson laughing about acceptable losses in Vanguard trials, admitting they'd set up Eddie's unit to fail. And Lena? She recorded Eddie's story, her camera catching every word as he told her about saving her dad's life, carrying a bleeding Victor through gunfire, only to be betrayed when he spoke out. The climax hit like a storm. Federal agents raided Victor's mansion, hauling out computers while news choppers buzzed overhead. Victor, in his silk pajamas, snarled, "You'll regret this," but his empire was crumbling. Sarah and Shade unearthed that hard drive, its videos damning enough to reopen every case tied to Vanguard. And Eddie, weak from years of stress, collapsed in a meeting with Lena and Sarah, his heart giving out under the weight of it all. In the hospital, Lena stayed by his side, whispering, "You saved him, Eddie, and now you're saving us all." When he woke, she showed him her video, her standing outside Grayson Tech, disowning her father, her voice fierce. "This man saved my dad's life, and we betrayed him." No more silence. The fallout was electric. Eddie testified in D.C., his voice steady as he laid out Vanguard's horrors, the room silent except for his words. Shade took a stage at a veterans rally, holding up his fake death certificate, saying, "They thought they could bury us, we're harder to kill than that." Victor's trial was a circus, guilty on conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, his face crumpling as Eddie recounted carrying him to safety. Lena's documentary broke records, her nonprofit, Out of the Dark, giving voice to whistleblowers. And Eddie? He got the Medal of Honor, pinned on by the president, who said, "You showed us courage doesn't need a spotlight." But the real moment came later, back on his corner in Asheville. Eddie picked up a broom, swept the street clean one last time, and sat on his bench, watching the city move on. A young driver slowed to avoid a puddle, nodding to him, and Eddie smiled. Maybe something had changed. But here's the thing, justice isn't tidy. Some say Victor got off too easy, that the system still protects its own. Others think Lena's too quick to ditch her family, or that Eddie should have spoken sooner. Me? I think about that bench, that broom, and a man who turned mud into truth. What do you think? Does justice ever really arrive, or is it always a fight? Drop a comment, share your take, and let's keep this story alive.